Hi spooky friends, welcome to Kelly Does Stuff. Today we're gonna paint some realistic stone steps. This is a follow-up to the video I did where I showed you 3 ways to carve spooky steps into styrofoam. And the last one of those was kind of like these realistic rock-ish type things. So I thought if you were carving those types of steps, maybe you'd be interested to see how I painted them. And this technique can be applied to any type of spooky steps that you want to make. So let's get painting!
Okay, first we gotta talk brushes. You're going to use a variety of brushes to create your realistic stone steps. I like to use a big fat round brush to apply my base coat. It allows you to cover the styrofoam thoroughly and quickly, and this is a brush I got at Michael's. Next, you're gonna want some small, pointy, round brushes to get into all those little nooks and crannies that you're going to make when you carve your steps. And then lastly, I use a variety of flat brushes to apply the different colors, highlights for the dry brushing. And this is a great time to break out those old brushes whose bristles look like they've really been through it. Now let's talk paint. Of course, this is going to be up to you to decide what type of stone steps that you want to create or any type of stairs that you're creating. But if you're looking to do something similar to what I create in this video, these are the colors that I used. Now let's get to painting. For my base coat, I mixed together brown and black acrylic paint to get the color that I wanted. For your base coat, you're going to want to go with a dark color, even if your stairs are ultimately going to be a lighter shade. The dark color, first of all, will cover the styrofoam well, so you don't have to do a lot of layers, but then also having little bits of that dark base coat show through here and there is going to add the realistic detail and depth to your finished product. When you have most of your steps covered, go ahead and grab one of your smaller pointy brushes to get into those small little nooks and crannies. And don't be afraid to load up that paintbrush with a lot of paint to make this part of the process go quickly. While the paint was still wet, I grabbed the Spanish olive to add it into the brown. I am layering it on top and not rubbing it in because I didn't want the colors to blend together. However, if you wanted more of a darkish green base coat, you could definitely do that. I wanted to add a little bit of depth and dimension to my base coat, so I wanted some of that green to be separate from the brown. Again, while all the paint was still wet, I added the fawn color. Then it was time to find a sunny spot to let it dry. And since it's hotter than the center of the sun here, it didn't take very long for it to dry. Angel takes painting very seriously and had to come along to inspect the pieces to make sure they really were dry. Speaking of Angel, she has an important message. Oh, thank you, Angel, for reminding all of our spooky friends to consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to all of you who have. Okay, now let's get into our first round of dry brushing. I'm taking the buttermilk and the fawn colors and mixing them together. I'm going to use a paintbrush to mix them together and then a different paintbrush to apply the dry brush to the styrofoam. And the reason for this is if I use the paintbrush that I use to mix everything together, there's going to be too much paint on that brush. Now this first layer of dry brushing is a heavier dry brush, so I'm going to put like a fair amount of paint if I could be so scientific about it, onto the brush. Always start with lighter, especially if you're just getting your feel for this, and then you're just gonna brush quickly, swiftly, softly over the surface of the styrofoam. And this is the first step in which I've really started to lighten up those stone steps. But you can see I'm really leaving a lot of that base coat color to come through. Once I was happy with the covering of that color, I now wanted to add some midtones of orange and green. So I'm starting first with that spicy orange. I'm adding just a little bit of paint to the tip of a very dry brush. I picked one where my bristles were kind of ruined looking, and then I brush off a lot of the paint before I apply it onto the styrofoam. And for this, I was applying it to just select stones that I wanted to have an orangey tint to them. Now, if you've been thinking these stone steps look a little bit different than the video where we actually carved the stone steps, don't worry, you're not imagining things. I did film the painting of the stone steps from the first video. Oh, hold that thought. So every time I want to add some more paint, I just repeat the process. Dip the brush in just a little bit of paint, brush most of it off, and then go to your styrofoam. Okay, back to the other thought. So basically the footage from the first set of steps I painted just wasn't great. The lighting was constantly changing. You couldn't see what I was doing, so I just painted some more steps. And here comes that Spanish olive, ready to party. Same deal as the orange. Pick the steps or pick the spots where I want to add the color. Now, we're talking realistic steps in this video, but rocks really come in so many different colors. So for the purposes of these rocks, we're going with orange and green, but there are red rocks. There may even be purple rocks somewhere. So it's really up to you, and you can decide that you mean realistic as in real life or realistic as in real inside your imagination. It's your project. Have fun. Do whatever you want. Buckle your seatbelt, spooky friends, because it's about to get extra spooky. We are going to put a little bit of water into a cup, and then we're going to add a little bit of black paint to create a wash. And then we're going to mix that together, take that wash, and apply it to our project. This cannot be right. We must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. No, don't worry. I'm saying this to my brain as much as I'm saying it to you, because every time I take a dark wash and apply it to the lighter colors, my brain's like, oh no, why are you ruining this thing that we just did? And I'm like, don't worry, we're not ruining it, because see, we're just dabbing, dab, a little bit of our wash, and all that color is going to give some extra detail and go into all those little grooves. And then we're going to take a paper towel and we're going to blot most of it off, but all the color that seeped into all the little cracks is going to stay, and it's going to look amazing. And people are going to be like, when did you hire a professional painter to paint your realistic rocks? Actually, no, they're going to say, where did you get these realistic rocks? Once we've let our amazing stone steps dry, we're going to go in with that buttermilk color for a dry brushing. And at this point, we're going to start to be a little bit more selective about where we apply these lighter and lighter shades and highlights and some of our various depth colors. So remember, you're just going to add even less paint onto a very dry brush. You can spread out your bristles a little bit, grab an older brush, wipe most of it off, and just do a little bit to start. You can always go in and add more. You're never going to believe what I did after that, spooky friends. I decided I want a little bit more green. I want a little bit more orange, but kind of just more as a little bit of a highlight. And so then I went in and dry brushed those colors. This is when you might also start to think, where might a little bit of moss or algae be growing? And then paint that into your steps as well. Oh, what's this? My project is on the move again. I had to step out into the sun where the lighting was better so I could get a sense of all of the different colors that I added and see where I wanted to go next. And where I wanted to go next was dry brush that buttermilk color mixed with just a little bit of white. And this is going to be just the smallest amount of paint on that brush. And this is where I'm really going to begin to define the shape of my rocks. I'm going to apply it to just the outside edges and definitely avoiding any of those crevices, any of that area where that dark wash has seeped in. That's where all those creepy little creatures are just waiting and watching and ready to attack you. So we don't want to add any of those highlights into those areas. Okay, spooky friends, this was the point where I decided to go a little bit wild, and I didn't show you this paint at the beginning because I had no idea that I was going to do this, and my brain was like, are you sure you want to do this? This sounds very scary. And I was like, isn't scary kind of the point? And also, it's going to be fine. What is the worst that's going to happen? But anyway, I had this like brown metallic paint and some orange metallic paint and some champagne metallic paint, and I just decided to go in and add little bits of that, almost as if like the sunset was like hitting the rocks. But I didn't really think about the light coming from one specific area because it was my project and it was fake life. And so I just decided to let the shiny sunset come from all over. But you can see here, it's just the tiniest amount of paint. And I'm getting most of it off and I'm just applying it to little specific areas where the imaginary spooky sunset light was hitting these rocks. And this felt so fun and also terrifying. And I did that for a while until it looked amazing, and also my brain couldn't handle being terrified by such bold, scary, shiny colors anymore. And then it was time to go in and add some more green. And here I'm going with the Spanish olive and then also this shamrock color that I didn't mention at the beginning because I hate planning. And if you've been here for a hot minute, you know that I hate planning. And even when I really tried to plan, I did not do a good job of planning. Now there's really no special formula to this. I applied each color individually. I mixed the colors. I didn't really worry about getting a separate brush for each color. I just wanted to go in again. Remember when we talked about the moss and the algae? I was kind of going in and defining some of those areas again. Now you're like, is this totally necessary? This is a lot of steps. No, it's definitely not necessary. Just do whatever makes you happy. Do whatever you want. I just get lost in this. It is so much fun for me. And honestly, at some point, I just sort of had to tell myself to stop or I'd be painting these same stone steps for the next 700 years. But I just wanted to go in with these colors, and you just kind of get into your project and you decide, what does it need? What is it telling me to do next? And then you can decide, do I want these steps to tell me what to do, or do I want to do what I want to do? And then finally, the moment has arrived. The final layer of our lightest dry brushing color, and this is just going to be a pure white. And again, so selective, thoughtful about where I'm going to apply this white, the tiniest amount of white on your brush, on a very small brush. And this is kind of my final little effort at defining the shape of my rocks. And really, the paintbrush does all of the work here because I just let it follow the natural ridges and edges that I created when I was carving my spooky stone steps. And there we have it, spooky friends. Our realistic stone steps are done. Let's take a look. Oh, how tragic. Our poor skeleton left his leg behind on the stone steps. And just for fun, let's see how we painted the stone steps from our previous video. If you're interested in how we carved those steps, please check out that video. That's it, spooky friends. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and share this video with 5 or 10 spooky friends. I'll see you next time, and happy creating.
Carve